Chosen one. Stop everything. A specific silence is falling over your life, the kind that happens in a theater right before the main event begins. The house lights are dimming because the atmosphere has shifted. The world is realizing that you, the chosen one, are about to steal the entire show. They were building a production without you. They had a vision, a hierarchy, a cast of characters, and every single one of those characters was selected specifically because they were controllable, not because they were the best, not because they were the deepest, not because they had the kind of substance that actually moves things, but because they fit the frame, because they were easy to manage, because they performed on cue and didn't ask questions that made the directors uncomfortable. They gave the visible roles to the ones who were loud, the ones who knew how to signal value without necessarily having it, the ones who dressed the part, spoke the right language, moved in the right circles. They built a show around people who had perfected the art of looking like something, and they called that the real thing, and you watched. Maybe you were in that world for a while. Maybe you tried to play the game. Maybe there was a season where you almost convinced yourself that the frame they were building was one you could live inside. But something always felt wrong, not wrong in a self-doubt kind of way. Wrong in a "this is not what I was built for" kind of way. Like wearing a costume that almost fits but pulls in all the wrong places. Like speaking a language that you can technically pronounce but that was never your mother tongue. That discomfort was not a deficiency, that was discernment. That friction between you and their frame was not you failing to fit in. It was the blueprint inside you, resisting a structure it was never designed for. And here is the first piece of foreshadowing I want you to hold, because we will come back to this. The reason you never fully fit their cast is not because you were less than what they were looking for. It is because you were built for a production they didn't have the authority to direct. They were casting for their show, but you were being cast for something else entirely. Something they hadn't written yet, something bigger than what they could imagine from inside the frame they were comfortable in. The production they built without you. Hold that image, remember it, because we are going to come back to it, and when we do, what you see standing in its place will answer every question you ever had about why you never belonged inside it. There came a season where everything got stripped, not mildly difficult, not moderately uncomfortable, but completely stripped. The things you thought were stable showed themselves to be anything but. The people you thought were permanent revealed their season. The version of yourself you had been operating as, the one that had been trying to make it work inside a system that was never designed for you, that version began to crack, and from the outside it looked like collapse. They saw it, and they did what people who were always waiting for permission to dismiss you always do. They got comfortable. They said, sometimes out loud, sometimes just to each other, that you had lost the plot, that you peaked, that whatever window you had, it had closed. They filled your silence with their commentary. They turned your stillness into a cautionary tale they could use to feel better about the fact that they were still performing their hollow show while you had gone somewhere they couldn't follow. You were being prepared. Every layer that got stripped in that season was a layer that would have held you back from what was coming. Think about it this way. A diamond does not come out of the ground looking like what it becomes. It comes out rough, covered in the rock that formed around it, looking nothing like the thing it is about to become. The pressure was not trying to destroy it. The pressure was the process. The cutting and grinding and polishing. What looks from the outside like damage is actually precision work. It is the careful, deliberate transformation of something already valuable into something finally visible. That season was your cutting, your pressure, and your precision work. You did not merely survive that season. You made choices in it that most people do not make. You chose in conditions that would justify bitterness, not to become bitter. You chose in seasons that would justify closing down, to stay open. You chose when the easier path was to become small and safe and palatable to people who were threatened by your depth, to remain exactly who you were. That was not weakness enduring hardship, that was power exercising itself in the only conditions where it could be tested at the level you needed it tested for what was coming next. The stripping season was not your ending, it was your qualifying round, and you cleared it. While you were going through the fire, they were going through the motions. They kept producing, they kept performing, they kept rotating through the cast they had built without you, adding new faces when the old ones lost their novelty, recycling formats when the audience started to drift. They got better at the surface, they refined the aesthetics, they worked the rooms and did everything a person who has decided that visibility is the goal does when they are serious about staying visible. And from a distance, if you were not paying close attention, it looked like they were winning. The show kept going, but the magic kept fading. The energy would spike, then hollow out. They could feel it, that thing they were trying to manufacture, that electricity, that quality that makes people lean forward instead of scroll past. It was not there, not consistently, not the way it had been when certain things were different, when certain people were still in the room. They tried to fix it, the way people who do not understand what they are missing always try to fix it. They swapped variables, new collaborators, new formats, new angles. They brought in people who were louder, flashier, more agreeable, people who would do what you would not. And it would work for a moment, a brief, bright, hollow moment, and then it would fall flat again. If this message activated your knowing, hype this video to connect with more chosen ones on this journey. Here is the thing about a scene that lost its soul. You can redecorate it endlessly. New furniture, new lighting, new people. But if the soul is gone, the soul is gone. And the audience, even the audience that cannot articulate what they are feeling, knows the difference between a room that has something real in it and a room that is very well decorated emptiness. Your absence was the evidence they did not want, because every failed substitution was a chapter in the same story. Every flat scene was a paragraph building toward the same conclusion. And that conclusion was building toward a collision, the moment the thing being forged in the fire walked back into the space that had been trying to run without it. Keep the image, the stage they kept trying to fill, the thing being formed in the fire that was going to walk onto that stage, because those two paths are about to meet, and when they do, the story enters its most important chapter. Before we get to the collision, I need to slow the story down right here, because this is the part that gets skipped. Everyone wants to fast forward to the entrance, the shift, the moment the room recalibrates. But what happened in the dark, the invisible season between the stripping and the stepping forward, that is where the real story lives. And if you do not understand what was happening there, you will not fully understand the power you are carrying now. The dark was not empty. It just looked that way from the outside. In the dark, you were being rebuilt at the level of identity, not your skills, your foundation, not your output, your source. The things that get formed in the quiet, invisible seasons are not the things that show up on a resume or register in a room full of people watching for visible signals of progress. They are the things that hold when everything external gets shaken. The knowing that does not depend on someone else's confirmation, the clarity that does not require the crowd to validate it, the sense of self that does not collapse when the approval disappears because it was never built on approval to begin with. Most people never get that foundation, not because they are less chosen, but because they never had a season that required them to build it. They moved fast enough, stayed visible enough, kept producing enough that they never had to find out who they were when none of that was available. They built impressive things on unexamined ground, and the buildings look good until the shaking comes, and then you see what they were built on. You had to build the ground first. That is what the dark was for. You've probably noticed a lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have stopped publishing, videos pulled, voices silenced. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. That's exactly why I'm putting you onto something real, Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching Chosen Ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app, Pocation, it's consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. Join Destiny Engine to support your favorite channels and use it for your own rise. It's a 360 win. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. You are developing a relationship with your own instincts that is not available to people who live entirely in the noise. When you are stripped of the external validation, the feedback, the applause, the visible metrics of progress, you have no choice but to start listening to something internal, and at first it is uncomfortable. The silence feels like failure, the absence of confirmation feels like abandonment. But slowly, if you stay in it long enough without running, and you stayed, something starts to come alive in you that was always there but could never be heard over the volume of everything else. It was your own voice, your own knowing and your own compass, not the voice that is performing for a room, not the knowing that is borrowed from someone else's framework, the actual, original, specific to you instinct that knows what is true before you can explain it, that knows which room is not for you before anyone says a word, that knows when something is being built on sand, even when everyone around you is celebrating it. That voice is now one of your most powerful assets, and you would not have it if the season had not gotten quiet enough for you to finally hear it. The dark was not a punishment, the dark was a studio. And what got recorded in there, in the silence, in the stripping, in the long nights of choosing yourself without any audience, that is the material that nobody can replicate, because they were not in the room when it was made. You were, and you carry it now, as the thing that makes you different from everyone who only knows the path of constant visibility and external confirmation. They have performance, you have presence, and the world finally is ready to feel the difference. Let that land for a moment. Performance can be studied, copied, and improved upon by anyone willing to put in the repetitions. The world is full of people who watched someone succeed and reverse-engineered the surface of it, the aesthetic, the language, the format, the angle. They got very good at the copy, and for a while the copy circulated as though it were the original, but presence cannot be copied. It cannot be studied into existence or rehearsed into authenticity. Presence is the residue of a real life being lived at full depth. It is the accumulated result of every honest choice you made in the dark, every moment you stayed true to yourself when performing something easier was available, every season you chose integrity over comfort when comfort was right there and integrity cost you something. Nobody can copy that, because the copy would require them to have lived your exact life, made your exact choices, survived your exact fire. And they did not, you did. This means what you carry into every room is not just valuable, it is exclusive. There is exactly one source for it in the world. There is no competing product, there is no upgraded version releasing next season. What you bring is a closed production made in a fire that burned specifically for you, and it will never be replicated because the conditions that produced it are gone. You are the only living proof that those conditions were real. It is quieter than people expect. It is not a dramatic confrontation or an engineered showdown. The real thing simply shows up, fully, without apology, without performance, without needing the room to confirm it belongs. And the contrast between it and everything that was pretending to be it becomes visible, all at once to everyone present in a way that cannot be unseen. That moment is yours, and I want you to understand exactly what you carry into it, because this is not small. You carry the weight of every season they tried to outlast but didn't, every substitution that proved your irreplaceability, every performance that got hollow without the one thing they couldn't recreate. You did not need to collect that evidence consciously. It accumulated in the atmosphere. It lives now in the specific gravity that surrounds a person who has been through something real and came out of it without bitterness and without needing anyone's applause to confirm their value. Here is what that looks like from the outside. It looks like someone who does not need to perform, not because they are withholding, but because they have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. It looks like someone who takes up exactly the space they are supposed to take, not aggressively, not apologetically, just fully. It looks like a frequency that the room begins to organize itself around without anyone deciding that it should. People feel it before they can name it, and once they feel it, they cannot unfeel it. The ones who were manufacturing their confidence feel the difference between that and yours. The ones who were performing their depth feel the difference between that and yours. Real does not compete with performed. It simply exists alongside it and lets the contrast speak. You don't need to point at anyone. You don't need to make any announcement. Your presence is the announcement. And the room's reaction, the way the energy tilts, the way the atmosphere adjusts, the way the conversation shifts toward something more real than it was before you walked in, that is not something you engineered. That is just what happens when the real thing arrives. It completes what was always incomplete. It settles what was always unsettled. It brings into focus what the room had been squinting to see. The real star just walked in, chosen one, and the show is about to find out what it was always supposed to be. The spotlight. Real attention, lasting influence, the kind of presence that doesn't just get a moment, but generates a movement, has never been something that responds to strategy, the way people chasing it believe it does. It is not an algorithm. It is not a reward for the most disciplined performer. It is something closer to a frequency, and it lands on people who are broadcasting the one signal it was designed to find: truth. Unperformed, uncurated, earned through fire truth. Think about every person in the production built without you. They were visible, some of them very visible. The light hit them, but it kept moving. Because the light is not looking for someone to illuminate. It is looking for someone who illuminates. There is a difference between a flashlight and a fire. A flashlight shines on things. A fire generates its own light. And the real spotlight has been searching for a fire. You are the fire. Not because you are louder, not because you are more strategically positioned, but because what lives inside you, the depth built through stripping seasons, the wisdom forged in fire, the unshakable knowing of a person who found out who they were with no external confirmation available. That is a warmth and a power that does not require fuel from outside. It generates. That is what the light has been searching for. The people who watched you during your silent season, the ones who assumed the quiet meant you were fading, they expected that if you came back at all, you would come back smaller, grateful for whatever the room was willing to offer. They did not account for what fire does to someone who was already chosen before it touched them. They expected a return. What is walking through the door is a revelation. Something needs to be named clearly, because it changes your posture toward everyone who filled your space while you were being prepared. They were placeholders, not villains. Placeholders, that distinction matters. A villain has power over you. A placeholder just occupies a space until the right thing arrives. And every substitute, every louder, flashier, more agreeable version of what the production thought it needed in the absence of what it actually needed, every single one of them was performing the function of holding the space warm until you got there. Think about what that means. Every failed substitution was, in narrative terms, building the contrast that would make your arrival undeniable. Every flat scene was a paragraph building toward the chapter where you walk in. Every moment the production tried to convince itself it did not need what you carry was actually a moment that proved in real time to everyone watching that it did. The placeholders were unwitting contributors to your story, without them demonstrating over and over that a certain quality cannot be manufactured. The room would not have been hungry in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. They set the table. They just did not realize they were setting it for you. Now here is what this means for your posture going forward. You spend zero energy on them, not in contempt, not in competition, not in score settling. You don't need to beat them. They were never actually your competition. They were in a different story, the story of what happens when a production tries to run without its essential element. You are in a different story, the story of what happens when that element finally arrives. Those are two different genres. One of them is yours. Keep your eyes on your own page. What is being written there is more interesting than anything happening in theirs. There was an audience watching the whole time, not the crowd that was cheering for the hollow show. A different audience, a quieter one. The people who were in the room and could feel that something was missing, even when they couldn't name what it was. The people who sat through performance after performance and kept having the same unexplainable feeling that they were waiting for something, that what they were being given was close but not it. Those people were waiting for you. They are the ones who, the moment you step into your full capacity, will feel something release in them, not just appreciation, recognition, the recognition of someone who has been holding a description of something in their body for a long time and suddenly sees the thing itself. They will not always tell you this with words. They will tell you with attention, with the quality of presence they bring when you speak, with the way they stop what they are doing when you enter, with the way they describe you to other people, not as impressive, not as talented, but as real, as exactly what they did not know they needed to see. That audience is loyal in a way that the crowd assembled by performance is not. The crowd assembled by performance follows whoever performs next. The audience assembled by truth stays, because what drew them was not a strategy you deployed, but a substance you carry, and substance does not expire when the trend moves on. You did not build this audience by pursuing it. You built it by becoming worthy of it. And the difference between an audience you pursued and an audience that found you is everything. One requires you to keep performing to maintain it. The other requires you to keep being yourself. And being yourself is the one thing that was never the problem. Understand who is watching and understand why. Because when you know that the room reorganizing around you is not random, that there are people in it who have been waiting specifically for the frequency you carry, it changes how you show up. It shifts you from hoping to be received to knowing you are already being received by the people who matter most. Walk in like you know that, because you do. Look at every piece of it, the production built without you, the stripping season, the silence, the failed substitutions, the flat scenes, the room that kept trying to fill a gap it didn't understand, and now you, inside your momentum, doing the work, shifting the atmosphere, building what only you could build. Looking at all of it from here, nothing went wrong. Every single thing that felt like a setback was actually precision. The delay was not the universe being indifferent to your calling. It was the universe being exact about it. You were not held back from your moment. You were held until your moment could receive the full version of what you are, without crushing you, without diluting you, without being wasted on an audience that wasn't yet ready to understand what they were standing in front of. You were not built for the early scenes, not because you were not good enough for them, but because you were too much for them. If you had arrived before the stripping, before the fire, before the seasons that forged the character and the depth and the unshakable foundation, you would have arrived powerful but incomplete, visible but not yet invincible. Instead, you arrived as the revelation, the moment the whole story was being written toward. The people who got there early burned bright and are fading. You are just getting started. Because what was built in the quiet, in the fire, in the long patient precision of being prepared instead of just positioned, does not have a short shelf life. What was built that way lasts, not as a trend, but as a standard, not as a moment, but as a movement. A moment is something that happens to you. A movement is something that happens through you. The delay existed because what was coming was never going to be a moment. It was always going to be a movement, and movements require foundations. Foundations require time. And time required trust in the dark, which is exactly what you demonstrated in every season they mistook for your absence. Nothing went wrong. Everything went exactly as it needed to go to produce exactly this. They handed you a script early, before you were old enough or wise enough to recognize it for what it was, a script that said who you were supposed to be, how much space you were allowed to take, what kind of ambition was appropriate, what dreams were reasonable, what version of you the world could comfortably hold. And for a while you tried to follow it, not because you were weak, because you were human, because everyone around you was performing from the same script, and the pressure to do the same was enormous. Because the cost of going off script, the discomfort, the confusion, the loneliness of being in a different frequency from everyone around you was real, and you paid it. You paid it long before you understood why. The thing inside you that was always too large for the lines they wrote, the knowing that kept pressing against the frame, the sense, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore, that the character they had cast you as and the person you actually were had almost nothing in common. You were not a supporting character in someone else's story. You were not the cautionary tale. You were not the one who needed to be managed, contained, redirected, or made smaller so that someone else could feel larger. You were the chosen one. The one the whole production was actually rotating around, even when the directors had given that credit to someone else. And the moment you put down their script, not dramatically, not in a speech, but quietly, decisively in the private space of your own knowing, was the moment the real story could begin. Going off their script is not rebellion, it is obedience. Obedience to the original blueprint, the one that was written for you before any of them had an opinion about who you were supposed to be. When you stop following the script they handed you and start living from the blueprint you were born with, everything that has been blocked begins to open. Not because you forced it, because you aligned, and alignment has a way of resolving problems that effort could not crack. You have been operating from that blueprint, maybe not perfectly, maybe not without stumbling back into the old script on the hard days, but you have been finding your way back to it, consistently, and that consistency showing up as yourself, even when the world kept offering you more comfortable alternatives, that is the evidence that you are exactly who this story needs at this moment. They gave you the wrong script, you wrote the right one, in real time, with your life as the page. That script is now the most powerful document in the room, and it is written in a language that the original directors don't have the vocabulary for, because it was composed in the fire they never entered. There is something happening among the people who wrote you off. I am going to name it clearly, not to invite you to gloat, but because understanding it will protect your energy. They are watching, not casually. The way people watch something they cannot explain but cannot look away from. They are tracking your movement, paying attention to what you are building, registering who is gravitating toward you and why, and privately, in the moments they will not broadcast, they are revising the assessment, revising the narrative, revising the story they told about you during your silence to whoever would listen. Some of them will never say it out loud. That is fine. You do not need their words. Their attention is already the admission. The fact that they cannot look away from what you are doing is itself the acknowledgement that what you are doing is undeniable, that what the fire built is real, and that every conclusion they drew about you during the quiet was wrong. The wrong version looks like this. You arrive, the room shifts, the momentum builds, and then somewhere in the flush of it, you feel the urge to say something, to post something, to make sure the people who counted you out know that you are back, to craft the comeback narrative in a way that positions the narrative in your favor and makes it clear to anyone watching that the people who doubted you were wrong. Do not do that, not because it is not satisfying to imagine, but because it is beneath where you are now. And more importantly, it would cost you the very thing that got you here. The power of the chosen one's arrival is precisely that it did not need to be announced. The room felt it, the atmosphere registered it, the show recalibrated around it. That happened without a press release, without a campaign, without a statement designed to reclaim the narrative. The truth walked in and did what truth does. It made itself undeniable through presence, not proclamation. The moment you start crafting the narrative about your own arrival, you step back into performance. And performance is the frequency you just left. Stay out of it. Let the work speak. Let the room speak. Let the people who are being moved by what you carry say what they need to say. Your job is not to manage the story of your rise. Your job is to keep rising. The difference between a person who is performing their power and a person who has it is exactly this. The performer needs the audience to confirm the power is real. The chosen one already knows, and that knowing, that deep, bone-level, fire-forged certainty about exactly who you are and what you carry, is the most unassailable position in any room. Walk from that place, build from that place, and let the room's response be what it will be, because when you are operating from that place, what the room does is not really the point anymore. The point is the work, the point is the movement, the point is the life being built by someone who finally stopped performing it and started truly living it. That is the show, Chosen One. And you are already stealing it, not by taking anything from anyone, but by being so undeniably real that everything false in the room reveals itself by comparison. You are not taking the lead, you are becoming the standard, and standards do not need to announce themselves. They just need to hold. You were never here to take the lead in their production. You were never designed to slide into the space they built and run it a little better than the people who ran it before you. That is a small story, and you are not a small story. You are here to change what the production is. To make the old format unnecessary, not by attacking it, but by making something so different in kind, so rooted in truth, so built on substance, so genuinely alive, that the old format simply cannot compete, not because you outperformed it, because you made it irrelevant. This is the genre rewrite. This is what chosen ones actually do when they arrive in full. They don't take the crown from the person wearing it. They make the whole idea of that particular crown seem small. They don't win the existing game. They shift what game is being played. They don't improve the standard that existed before them. They become a new standard, one that the old metrics cannot measure, one that the old framework cannot categorize, one that requires people to expand their understanding of what is possible before they can even begin to evaluate it. That is you. That has always been you. Even in the seasons when you were invisible, even in the seasons when the old production seemed to be running fine without you, the incompatibility you felt with their frame was never a deficiency. It was the evidence of the genre you were born to write. You could not fit inside their format because you were built to replace it, not with force but with something so much more real that the comparison makes the choice obvious. And now, with the preparation complete, and the fire finished and the character fully formed, with the depth, the wisdom, the presence, the unshakable knowing of someone who has been through the furnace and come out the other side still themselves, now you build the thing you were always supposed to build, in your own format, on your own terms, in the genre that only you can write because only you lived the story that produced it. The old show needed you to fit in. The new show needs you to be exactly what you are, and exactly what you are is more than enough. It is precisely enough, divinely enough, right on time enough. The main character just arrived, not late, not finally, but right on time, divinely on time, precisely on time, in exactly the way that only makes sense now that the whole story is visible. The lights are not searching anymore, chosen one. They are on you, and where they have landed they stay. Now go build what you were built to build. Go speak what the fire gave you language for. Go occupy every room that was always waiting to be completed by your presence. Go write the chapters that nobody else on earth can write, because nobody else on earth lived what you lived and came out of it as the full, undiminished, fire-forged, divinely selected version of themselves that you are right now. The show is not starting because you are finally ready. The show is starting because it could not begin without you, and it begins